Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about my anticipated releases for April to June of 2023. There are so many great looking books coming out in the next 3 months, honestly. Like, I've got a list of about 29 books that I think I'm gonna have to cut corners a bit. I think I'm gonna have to whittle this number down to just like the key essential ones. And I still think this video is going to end up being really, really long. So without much further ado, I think I better just get straight into them. Going in chronological order of date of publication, the first book that I'm going to speak about today is coming out on the 13th of April. We have Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. I've previously read Jennifer Saint's Ariadne, which I wasn't too much of a fan of, but then I read Electra last year and really, really enjoyed it. So I'm hoping that this is an upward trajectory of me really enjoying Jennifer Saint's works. And to be honest with you, Atalanta is a figure of ancient Greek mythology who I don't really know anything about, so this might be a really good introduction for me. When a daughter is born to the king of Arcadia, she brings only disappointment. Left exposed on a mountainside, the defenceless infant Atalanta is left to the mercy of a passing mother bear and raised alongside the cubs under the protective eye of the god Artemis. Swearing that she will prove her worth alongside the famed heroes of Greece, Atalanta leaves her forest to join Jason's band of Argonauts. But can she carve out her own place in the legends in a world made for men? Another Greek myth retelling that is coming out on the 13th of April is No Season But the Summer by Matilda Leyser, which, as the title suggests, is based on the myth of Hades, Persephone and Demeter. And funnily enough, considering how much Hades and Persephone fiction retellings that are out there, I've actually never read a Hades and Persephone retelling, so this might be a good place to start. Persephone spends 6 months of the year under the ground with her husband, the king of the dead, and 6 months on earth with her mother, the goddess of the harvest. It has been this way for 9,000 years since the deal was struck. But when she resurfaces this spring, something is different. Rains lash the land, crops grow out of season or not at all. There are people trying to build a road through the woods, and her mother does not seem able to stop them. The natural world is changing rapidly, and even the gods have lost control. When Demeter tries to regain her powers and fend off her daughter's husband, who wants to drag his queen back underground for good, Persephone finally gets a taste of freedom, joining a group of protesters. Used to blinking up at the world from below, as she looks down from the earth for the very first time, from the treetops with activist snow, Persephone realises that there are choices she can make for herself. But what will these choices mean for her mother, her husband, and for the new shoots of life inside her? No Season But the Summer takes a classic myth and turns it on its head, asking what will happen when our oldest stories fail us, when all the rules have changed. It is, above all, a book about choice. Also coming out on the 13th of April is I, Julian, which is a historical fiction retelling of the life of Julian of Norwich. I recently read For Thy Great Pain Have Mercy on My Little Pain, which is telling her story alongside that of Marjorie Kemp. And it was interesting, though I don't know how very engaged with it I was, but when I saw that this was coming out, I thought, ooh, interesting. I do have a bit of background on Julian of Norwich now, so I wonder what I make of this. From the author of Miles to Go Before I Sleep comes I, Julian, the account of a medieval woman who dares to tell her own story, battling grief, plague, the church and societal expectations to do so. Compelled by the powerful vision she had when close to death, Julian finds a way to live a life of freedom as an anchoress, bricked up in a small room on the side of a church, and to write of what she has seen. The result, passed from hand to hand, is the first book to be written by a woman in English. Tender, luminous, meditative and powerful, Julian writes of her love for God and God's love for the whole of creation. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well. Then changing tact a little bit, we have Happy Place by Emily Henry, the very first romance novel that is on this list, coming out on the 27th of April. I've read all 3 of Emily Henry's books so far, Beach Read You and Me on Vacation and Book Lovers, and very much enjoyed my time with those books, so I am very much anticipating this new release. 2 X's, 1 Pact. Could this holiday change everything? Harriet and Wynne are the perfect couple. They go together like bread and butter, gin and tonic, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. Every year for the past decade, they have run away from their lives to drink far too much wine and soak up the sea air with their favourite people in the world. Except this year, they are lying through their teeth. Harriet and Wynne broke up 6 months ago, and they still haven't told anyone. But this is the last time they'll all be together here. The cottage is for sale, and since they can't bear to break their best friends' hearts, they'll fake it for 1 more week. But how can you pretend to be in love and get away with it in front of people who know you best? Brimming with characters you can't help but fall for and off-the-charts chemistry, Happy Place is Emily Henry doing what she does best. Will we ever get an Emily Henry book that doesn't take place on holiday? I wonder. A poetry collection that is coming out on the 4th of May is Tomorrow Someone Will Arrest You by Mina Khandisambi. I absolutely loved Mina Khandisambi's novel When I Hit You. It's one of my favourite books of all time, and so I'm really intrigued by the premise of this poetry collection. Very interested to see what I make of her poetry poetry. These poems chronicle wanting, art making, and the practicing of resistance and solidarity in the face of a hostile state. Here the personal is political, and Kandasamy moves between sex, desire, family, and wider societal issues of caste, the refugee crisis, and freedom of expression with grace and defiance. This is a bold, unforgettable collection by a poet who compels us to sit up and listen. Then next up we have Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lux Croucher, which is one I've seen particularly the proofs of on social media, which have these like gorgeous little scratch off proofs. Lux Croucher has previously written like Regency romances, and this is their first foray into medieval romance, or medieval inspired. Gwen, the quick-witted Princess of England, and Arthur, the future Lord and General Gadabout, have been betrothed since birth. Unfortunately, the only thing they can agree on is that they hate each other. I don't know, when I read that, it kind of reminded me of, have you ever seen The Swan Princess? The very first song in that is these two, Odette and Derek, have been betrothed since they were babies, and there's this whole like montage song where they're singing about how much they hate each other, and then of course they end up falling in love, but I don't think that's the tack that this book is going to take. When Gwen catches Art kissing her boy, and Art discovers where Gwen hides her diary, complete with racy entries about Bridget Leclerc, the kingdom's only female knight, they become reluctant allies. By pretending to fall for each other, their mutual protection will be assured. But how long can they keep up the ruse? With Gwen growing closer to Bridget and Art becoming unaccountably fond of Gabriel, Gwen's infuriatingly serious bookish brother, the path to true love is looking far from straight. Pivoting to non-fiction history, we have Young Queens, 3 Renaissance Women and the Price of Power by Leah Redmond Chang. 16th century Europe. Renaissance masters paint the ceilings of Florentine churches, kings battle for control of the continent, and the Reformation forever changes the religious organisation of society. Amidst it all, 3 young women come of age and into power in an era of empires and revolutions. Catherine de' Medici's story begins in a convent stormed by soldiers intent on seizing the key to power in Florence, Catherine herself, a girl barely 11 years old. It ends with her as the controversial Queen Mother of France, a woman both revered and reviled. Mary, Queen of Scots' story begins in Scotland and ends in England. A queen turned traitor, from the confines of her English prison, she longs for the idyll of her childhood in France. Elizabeth de Valois' story begins in France, where she is born the beloved daughter of a king. It ends tragically in Spain as a cherished queen consort and mother, one who must make the ultimate sacrifice for her kingdom. Catherine, Mary and Elizabeth lived at the French court together for many years before scattering to different kingdoms. These years bound them to one another through blood and marriage, alliance and friendship, love and filial piety, bonds that were tested when the women were forced to part and take on new roles. To rule, they would learn, was to wage a constant war against the deeply entrenched misogyny of their time. A crown could exalt a young woman. Equally, it could destroy her. I have a friend who really loves the TV show Reign, which is a show that I could not stomach more than 2 episodes of, and I'm really tempted to buy this for her, to be like, hey, I know you like this show that's meant to be historical, well, here's what actually happened. Next up we have the second instalment in Alison Weir's Tudor Roses series. Alison Weir in her historical fiction typically looks at women of history, but this time she is completely changing her perspective, and this new Tudor Rose book is looking at the life and perspective of Henry VIII. And so we have coming out on the 11th of May, Henry VIII, The Heart and the Crown. A second son not born to rule becomes a man and a king. In grand royal palaces, Prince Harry grows up dreaming of knights and chivalry, and the golden age of kings that awaits his older brother. But Arthur's untimely death sees Harry crowned King Henry of England. As his power and influence extends, so commences a lifelong battle between head and heart, love and duty. Henry rules by divine right, yet his prayers for a son go unanswered. The future of his great dynasty depends on an heir, and the crown weighs heavy on a king with all but his one true desire. This month for History-a-thon, I'm actually reading the first of the Tudor Rose series, which is looking at the perspective of his mother, Elizabeth of York. So I'll have to report back. To be honest with you, when it comes to this series, I'm much more likely to be picking it up in paperback rather than picking up the hardback when it first comes out. So there might be a little delay in me getting around to this book, but I am nonetheless very excited for it. Then going back to romance books, we have a new book by Christina Lauren. I've really enjoyed 2 of their works before, The Unhoneymooners and Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. And now coming out on the 16th of May, we have The True Love Experiment. Felicity Fizzy Chan is lost. Sure, she has an incredible career as a beloved romance novelist with numerous bestsellers to her name, but when she's asked to give a commencement address, it hits her. She hasn't been practicing what she has preached. She hasn't been in love. In lust, sure, but that swoon-worthy, can't stop thinking about him, all-encompassing feeling, nope. And suddenly the optimism she's encouraged in her readers starts to feel like a lie. Connor Prince, documentary filmmaker and single father, loves that his work allows him to live near his daughter. Then his profit-minded boss orders him to create a reality TV show, putting it all in jeopardy. Desperate to find his romantic lead, a chance run-in with an exasperated Fizzy offers Connor the perfect solution. What if he could show the Queen of Romance herself, falling head over heels? But when production on the True Love experiment begins, Connor wonders if that perfect match will ever be in the cue cards for him too. And I wonder if these two will realise that their true love is actually each other. Coming out on the 18th of May, we have another Tudor non-fiction, this time written by renowned historian Tracy Borman, looking at the life of Anne Boleyn and Elizabeth I, the mother and daughter who changed history. Both women I really love learning more about, so I am very excited for this one. Anne Boleyn is a subject of enduring fascination. By far the most famous of Henry VIII's 6 wives, she has inspired books, documentaries and films, and she is the subject of intense debate even today. For the most part, she's considered in the context of her relationship with Tudor England's much-married monarch. Dramatic though this story is, of even greater interest and significance is the relationship between Anne and her daughter, the future Elizabeth I. Elizabeth was less than 3 years old when her mother was executed. Given that she could have held precious few memories of Anne, it is often assumed that her mother exerted little influence over her. But this is both inaccurate and misleading. Elizabeth knew she had to be discreet about Anne, but there is compelling evidence that her mother exerted a profound influence on her character, beliefs and reign. Even during Henry's lifetime, Elizabeth dared to express her sympathy for her late mother by secretly wearing Anne's famous A pendant when she sat for a painting with her father and siblings. Piecing together evidence from original documents and artefacts, this book tells the story of Anne Boleyn's relationship with and influence over her daughter Elizabeth. In doing so, it sheds new light on 2 of the most famous and influential women in history. Coming out on the 6th of June, we have Lady Caroline Lamb, A Free Spirit by Antonia Fraser. Back last year, I read Antonia Fraser's biography of Caroline Norton and really enjoyed that. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So here we have another rebellious Caroline who was a bit of a scandalous lady in her day. From the outset, Caroline Lamb had a rebellious nature. From childhood, she grew increasingly troublesome, experimenting with sedatives like laudanum, and she had a special governess to control her. She also had a merciless wit and talent for mimicry. She spoke French and German fluently, knew Greek and Latin, and sketched impressive portraits. As the niece of Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, she was already well connected, and her courtly skills resulted in her marriage to the Honourable William Lamb, later Lord Melbourne, at the age of 19. For a few years they enjoyed a happy marriage, despite Lamb's siblings and mother-in-law detesting her and referring to her as the little beast. Charming. In 1812, Caroline embarked on a well-publicised affair with the poet Lord Byron. He was 24, she 26. Her phrase, mad, bad and dangerous to know, became his lasting epitaph. When he broke things off, Caroline made increasingly public attempts to reunite. Her obsession came to define much of her later life, as well as her own writing, most notably the Gothic novel Glenarvan and Byron's. Antonia Fraser's vividly compelling biography animates the life of a free spirit who was far more than mad, bad and dangerous to know. Then the last 2 books I'm going to speak about today are both romance books. The first one, a return to an author that I have absolutely loved the 2 books that I've read from them before, and that is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I read The Love Hypothesis in 2022 on holiday and loved it. I then read Love on the Brain earlier this year and I liked it even more. So once again, I'm hoping that this is just going to be an upward trajectory and I just keep on loving Ali Hazelwood. The many lives of theoretical physicist Elsie Hanaway have finally caught up with her. By day, she's an adjunct professor toiling away at grading labs and teaching thermodynamics in the hopes of landing tenure. By other day, Elsie makes up for her non-existent paycheck by offering her services as a fake girlfriend, tapping into her expertly honed people-pleasing skills to embody whichever version of herself her client needs. Honestly, it's a pretty sweet gig. Until her carefully constructed Elsieverse comes crashing down. Because Jack Smith, the annoyingly attractive and arrogant older brother of her favourite client, turns out to be the cold-hearted experimental physicist who ruined her mentor's career and undermined the reputation of theorists everywhere. And he's the same Jack Smith who rules over the physics department at MIT, standing right between Elsie and her dream job. Elsie is prepared for an all-out war of scholarly sabotage, but those long penetrating looks, not having to be anything other than her true self when she's with him, will falling into an experimentalist's orbit finally tempt her to put her most guarded theories of love into practice. Considering that I am not a science person in the slightest, it's amazing how much I've enjoyed her STEMinist romance books, and this one looks no different. Sometimes it's just very nice to know exactly what you're going to get. The final romance book and the final book that I'm going to talk to you about today is one that I've seen quite a few people highly anticipating, and I know nothing about this author, so I'm not quite sure what to expect. Coming out on the 22nd 22nd of June, we have The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegemund-Broka, so a duo-authored romance book. 3 years ago, Katrina Freeling and Nathan Van Huysen were the brightest literary stars on the horizon, their co-written book topping bestseller lists. But on the heels of their greatest success, they ended their partnership on bad terms. They haven't spoken since and never plan to, except they have one final book due on contract. Forced to reunite, they hole up in the tiny Florida town where they wrote their previous book, trying to finish a new manuscript quickly and painlessly. Working through the reasons they've hated each other for the past 3 years isn't easy, especially not while writing a romantic novel. While passion and prose push them closer together in the Florida heat, Katrina and Nathan will learn that relationships, like writing, sometimes take a few rough drafts before they get it right. Achingly romantic, The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegemund-Broka is an intimate will they won't they love story. And don't we all love a bit of that? So there we go. That wasn't all 29 books that I did have on my little wish list, but just for ease and speed of getting this video up, I thought better to cut back and just focus on the heavy hitters in my mind. Do let me know what you think about any of these books, and also if there are any new books coming out between April and June that you're particularly excited about that I didn't mention today. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.